go from here. So, all right, thank you everybody for jumping on today. For those of you, maybe we do a quick introduction around. There's most of us know each other, but there might be a few new people on here. This is a kind of parking implementation group thinking about downtown Mystic that both the town of Groton and the town of Stonington are involved in. And John Burke has been our consultant on this project. He's worked with us on the original Mystic parking implementation project. There was a study that was sent around to everyone that we wrapped up a little over a year ago. And that really laid the groundwork for a lot of the steps that we need to now think about for the two towns on how do we implement these steps? What are we willing to implement with our partners, the cost of that, the impacts, and the timeline. So I'm John Reiner. I'm the Director of Planning and Development for the town of Groton. And let's see, next person on my row is Todd Brady. If you want to just say hello. Oh, you're muted, Todd. Oh. And your audio is a disaster. Your audio is no good, Todd. Still no good. All right, we'll come back to you. All right, Jeff Pritchard.
Hi, Jeff Pritchard, Planning and Zoning Commission of Town of Groton.
Okay. And Bruce Jones.
Bruce Jones, Town Councilor, Town of Groton.
Robert.
Hi, Robert Morris, Vice Chair of the Economic Development Commission of Groton.
Thank you. Robert O'Shazy.
O'Shaughnessy. I'm the chairman of the Police Commission in Stonington.
All right, thank you. Pamela.
Pamela Feltis, Mystic Museum of Art.
Excellent. Thank you for joining. Paul.
Paul Sarter. I started on this committee as a resident. I live in downtown Mystic, but since then I've also been elected to the 3-member executive board of the Mystic Fire District.
Oh, excellent. Okay. Let's see. Did Bruce Jones go?
Yep.
Okay. Paige.
Hello, Paige Bronk, Economic and Community Development Manager, Town of Groton.
All right. Greg Hanover.
Hello, Greg Hanover, Director of Public Works for Town of Groton.
Hi, Shannon.
Shannon McKenzie, Vice President, Mystic Seaport Museum.
LJ.
Good afternoon, Chief LJ Fazaro, Police Chief of the Town of Groton. I also serve on the traffic of the town manager.
John.
And I'm John Burke. I'm a parking and transit consultant here in New England.
Excellent. All right, we got too many Johns on this call. So John
Goten. Sorry, I'm sorry.
Oh, it's okay. No, that's good, John.
John Groton, did you say John?
I did.
John? Okay, John. John Groton from the Economic Development Commission of Stonington.
All right, thanks for joining. All right, Bruce Flax.
Hi, everybody. I'm Bruce Flax, the president of the Greater Mystic Chamber of Commerce.
Great. All right. Sounds good.
All right, thank you. Susan Cullen.
Hi, I'm Susan Cullen. I'm the Director of Economic and Community Development for the town of Stonington.
Okay. Let's see, John Burt.
John Burt, Town Manager for Groton. Excuse my voice, I'm fairly sick today. And I do see Captain Greg McCarthy's under attendee. Okay.
Yeah, I just bumped him up and I'll try to promote him to panelist, but he can talk now. So Greg McCarthy. All right, maybe he'll jump in. All right, so, all right, thanks for the introductions and going through that. So I will, John Burke, yeah, we get a lot of Johns and a John Burt and a John Burke. So I'll just try to keep that all straight. John Burke, did you want to, first item on the agenda, going over kind of where we started and then where we're going?
Yes, I will. I'm glad to do that. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm really happy here to be back with you again. It's been, as John said, been just about a little bit more than a year since we issued the Mystic Parking Study report, and a lot has happened in the village with regard to parking, and we've seen some of the elements of the recommendations move forward on the private side with projects that we're going to hear about, I guess, in a little bit, report outs on. But on the public side, we want to start to formulate that strategy and try to put forth a series of complementary actions that will make things much better down there. I thought maybe to start just to go through very, very briefly the parking program elements that were recommended a year ago. And there were two sets of these. These are on page 33 and 34 of the final report, which focused on year-round actions, and then just seasonal, high season actions when demand is the greatest. The year-round elements started really with a recommendation for expanding off-street parking because there is a shortage of off-street public parking in Mystic. And that's not to be confused with the need for new structured parking or constructing new parking. It's just simply stated that in our review of the 5-minute zone, walk zone, that there's a shortage of that, during the peak season. So expanding off-street parking is something we'd like to look at, and that particularly on shared lot agreements. That means potential lease agreements, and even in some cases can mean for communities like this, acquisition of parcels when it makes sense. We saw one come up for sale, 1 Pearl Street. Of course, that's on the private tax roll. It's a good thing to keep that private and keep it parking. But that's also something that the communities can keep an eye out for, shared, leased, and acquired. Okay. And so we also, in looking at that, we look at parking on street that may be unregulated, that may be further out from the 5-minute zone, that may be available. Sometimes what comes to mind is like Library Street there in Groton, where, even when the Union Baptist Church is full and the downtown's full, that street sometimes is half empty, and it's right next to the lot that's full. So there might be some confusion about, can I park here? Can I not park here? And maybe striping that space makes sense to also expand the effective long-term off-street parking. And keep people, by the way, from parking in front of driveways and too close to driveways and things like that. So that was one. We also had recommended expanding the art museum lot. I think they've gone through an automation project. Maybe we'll hear a little bit about that's gone forward. We talked about metering the 2-hour zone, both sides of the bridge. Not a lot of parking spaces, maybe 150 parking spaces, but these are the spaces that are designated for visitors and customers, and are in the highest demand of probably all the parking downtown. And so the need for creating availability in those spaces, for moving employees out of those spaces, for reducing the amount of people circling, looking for parking and adding to your traffic problem downtown. All of those things can be remedied with a paid parking. And, ensuring that those payments can come from mobile payments, from cash, from credit, all options, whether it's QR code. You've seen some of that go into town now on the private side, text to pay, all of these types of options should be available. Merchant validations at the meter. We talked about perhaps 15 minutes free at the meter to start the session is a possibility. Certainly, once we've expanded off-street parking through shared lot agreements and other avenues, that there's an opportunity to have employee permit parking. So there's a way to provide the employee a short walk, not materially too much different than what they're trying to find in the 2-hour zone, but off-street and maybe a little bit further away, right? So a permit program was recommended. And then expanding enforcement coverage such that we have 1 enforcement officer on both sides of the bridge at all times during the regulated times. And that's typically, 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. and then providing them with the latest technology so that they're able to use wireless, handheld devices, whether they're scanning plates or lookups, or even LPL, license plate recognition from the vehicle. That's the current way that we enforce high demand downtowns like Mystic. So those are, along with that enforcement, we recommended that both sides of the bridge consider consistent parking regulations, whether that's, time limits, fees, fines, how the customer views Mystic as one village. They don't view it as two towns. So we'd like to see that kind of consistency over time. And then certainly promoting valet. The majority of communities on the New England coast promote valet for the very reason that you're just taking cars, maybe losing a space or two on the street during the dinner hour, and moving some of these cars that would otherwise be sitting on the waterfront, maybe move those outside at a location that's agreeable to the municipality under a regulated valet. So that's a very popular, very effective strategy for parking. So, and then, finally, monitoring parking occupancy rates on residential streets for customer employee infiltration, which may require regulation in certain circumstances where you might have, say, multifamily housing or a high need for parking that isn't met on the residential side. So we have to continue to monitor as these things go forward. We're not going to turn a blind eye and just put it out and walk away. So that's sort of the real season during the year-round season, as we say. And year-round, by the way, could mean for metered parking, could mean, April to December. You certainly had, we went out and looked at demand in October, November. You certainly had the demand for regulated parking in those months when we did our studies. January, February, March, a lot of coastal communities decide to relax their enforcement requirements, relax their paid program in the months of January, February, and March. Why? Because demand significantly drops. So some communities will drop it altogether. Some might just continue time zones on Main Street, and so those are things that we want to talk about. Summer seasonally, we want to do all that we talked about, but now we're interested in peripheral parking. 10 minutes away, we're looking at those parking lots as well. I know you've got a pilot shuttle going on at the Seaport Mystic Museum there in the South Lot. That's a 12-minute walk to the bridge. So certainly a reasonable walk in what is extremely high demand village. That's a reasonable walk distance for a lot of people, especially because it's flat. So, we want to look at acquiring more peripheral lots. We want to link that to a shuttle bus system over time, perhaps a shuttle system that could come all the way from 95. And we kind of looked at some potential routes that don't get into the busyness of the bridge traffic that would wipe out the effectiveness of that shuttle, but that could link these hotels and attractions and all this parking that isn't being used necessarily all the time with the Amtrak station, maybe down the village area. So it has to be, as I say, fast, free, and fun. It's not going to solve all your parking problems, but it's an important element of it. And it can be supported certainly with, in the state of Connecticut, 70% operating funds by the Connecticut DOT. And, we've had a couple of conversations with your general manager at SEAT, Mike Carroll, and he certainly is interested in participating in the development of something. Now you've got a pilot that could be expanded over time. So, that's the kind of thing that we want to look at. One thing I want to leave you though in the recommendations section here is we don't typically cherry pick. We really, these recommendations are complementary of one another. They don't work particularly well when one's removed. And for instance, paid parking is really the glue, is really the way that you put folks you put employees in employee permit lots. It's the way you put people in the seats of buses. That's how buses fill. If parking's free in the downtown, there's very little incentive for folks to remotely park and walk in, shuttle in, seek an alternative that may be slightly less efficient for them, albeit at a lower price. So I just wanted to make sure I mentioned that these are complementary elements. So I know we're going to talk talk more about these as we go forward. But maybe that's a good segue, John, to go back to the outreach forum survey on some of these recommendations that you did.
Yeah, here, let me try to share my screen showing those recommendations. So for those of you not familiar, the town of Groton, back a number of months ago, launched a new platform called Greater Groton. And we have a host, a number of different topics up there that we can have surveys, we can post information, the public can offer feedback on it. And it's a tool that we've been using quite a bit on a number of special projects. And I believe we had sent out to everyone a little flyer that looked like this, or kind of a summary sheet of what was happening on our Greater Groton site. And just to kind of give a little bit of quick feedback. So, you know, here we gave some kind of pooled results of what people are looking for the most. You know, not surprising, the general feedback we're getting from the surveys is expand off-street public parking options, which, you know, that is one of the more costly things to do. As John kind of just went over, addressing peak summer demand, parking meters, residential parking permits, employee parking, and valet, you know, all getting a little bit, but it really, you know, the biggest item is expanding that off-street public parking options. But I don't, you know, again, it's the cost of things. So we are getting some feedback on that. Also hearing, you know, the participation levels of how many people are involved in looking at this survey. This was based off of, about say 10 days ago now, as of July 12th. We do have a fair amount of people that are looking at the site. And, you know, one of the things that we really hope that all of you, as you're involved in this project, can help do is, at least for the Groton side and or for the Stonington side, steer people towards this webpage. Ask them to offer some feedback, and also in your conversations with people, try to get some feedback from them, disseminate this information as best as possible about the larger Mystic parking study, because it's often hard to get that public feedback and input. When we went before our town council, probably 3 or 4 months ago, John, the time flies, we gave an overview, a little bit more in depth of what you just did of the previous parking study. There are a lot of good questions, a lot of good dialogue, but there is still a desire from a number of council members, at least on the Groton side, of how can we be getting more public feedback and more public input, and what are the next steps from there. So that's something that's going to keep coming up, I think, through this process. Also, what you'll see in that handout was specifically a number of the ideas and suggestions that people could plug into the website. I'm not going to go through all of these today. People can read through this total 5-page document, but, you know, definitely suggestions and comments that were happening and what we were getting from people, ranging from trolleys, we need a parking garage, we don't want a parking garage, think about aesthetics, you know, police enforcement, things along those lines. We also did get some mapping tool suggestions and comments. Again, you know, people trying to push the shared lot agreements with the church parking that came up time and time again. And yeah, happy to answer any questions on the feedback that we got through there. No? Okay. So can everybody see the agenda now? Okay.
Yes.
All right. So John Burke went through the summary of the study recommendations. I just wanted to give a little bit of feedback on that Greater Groton community outreach. Again, that is still open and it's continuing to get additional public feedback. So if people can steer the public and interested parties towards that document, that's great. Or if people want to send us, you know, emails to myself or to Susan Cullen on the Stonington side, that's something we can certainly share with the group and just help us keep moving this project forward. So the other item we wanted to cover, the next agenda item, were the parking initiatives in Mystic that have happened since we did that parking study. And there really has been a lot of projects happening on the private side of things. And I know someone is on from the Mystic Museum of Art. I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about that project, or John Burke, if you want to weigh in on that also.
Okay.
I think, yeah, sorry.
Go ahead.
I think Pamela was here from the museum. I don't know if
Right.
you wanted to talk a little
Actually,
bit about that.
hopefully Todd Brady can talk if his microphone's working. Todd?
Is it working?
Yes. You
Yeah.
sound great, Todd.
Yeah, just by way of introduction, I'm Todd Brady. I'm the owner of Factory Square and Randall's Wharf Mystic Downtown Marina, and I also am on the board of the Mystic Museum of Art, at least for a couple more months, but they keep extending my term. But I'm at year 7, so I think I'm getting about done. Yeah, as most of you probably know, over the past 6 months or so, the museum has instituted and implemented a non-attended parking system. Utilizes license plate readers. It also, and those are keyed into people who have paid for parking on an ongoing basis, and also for those who come in. And unfortunately, I've been so busy otherwise, I can't comment all that specifically about how it's working out, other than it seems to be working. It's required some modifications, and the biggest issue, I think, is trying to avoid backups at the exit. And Pamela, I think you probably confirmed this to me. There are kiosks where the people who park there can pay in advance of getting in line, but I would say they're probably not being utilized to anywhere near the degree that we had hoped. Would you agree that's the case?
Yes, absolutely. There's a lot of confusion, which Laz Parking, who is actually managing it, has been working quite hard to overcome. The problem is the majority of the users are one-time users, so they come and they don't learn. But they most peak times they have somebody on site. So when there is that person trying to check out who's terribly confused, it gets taken care of timely. But at peak times there are still quite long backups. We have also tried to change parking patterns, so there's only one line leaving, because that's also been creating a lot of problems in terms of emerging. So hopefully the growing pains will be over soon.
Yeah, it's you get cars approaching from both directions, and that was not the plan. The plan was that everyone would have to swing around and come and leave at the same place. Of course, what happens is that you could have 5 people use the kiosk and have their ticket all ready to go, but if the person who's actually at the exit point is confused or whatever, everybody else is in backed up, and we don't currently have enough room to have 2 lanes, which would make, I think, a big difference. But that's another issue that's being dealt with. But anyway, suffice to say that it's working better than the prior attempt by the museum about 20 years ago to go to a non-attended parking system, which really was pretty disastrous from the get-go.
All right. Thank you, Todd and Pamela. And any other plans in the near future, aside from continuing to work with Laz and just improving the system you have there?
Well, there were plans drawn up about probably 9 years ago to actually reconfigure the parking lot, which would have produced more parking spaces, and that is still something that the museum is looking at. I think it's probably something you could justify on a capital improvement basis in terms of additional income, but it would involve, going back to planning and zoning, because it's basically reformulating the current location of the lanes, the parking, and everything else. And the museum and its partner in this Steamboat Wharf spent a fairly significant amount of money implementing this new system. So I think we're letting the dust settle a little bit and see how it affects our overall income. The advantage of the current system is that the system is basically, you have to pay to park there 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, whereas in the prior system, the gate went up at 1 o'clock in the morning, and there were a fair number of people who gained that fairly successfully, and would just hang around till the gate went up and then leave with never pay.
Gotcha. Okay. All right, thanks. Let's see, the new paid public parking in certain private lots. I think there's a number of those around. John Burke, do you want to speak to those a little bit before we jump over to the Mystic Seaport?
Sure. Yeah, I know. In talking with Leo Roach, I believe he just started at 1 Pearl Street with the pay station in that lot, and I think utilization revenue is fairly strong in the first week, from what I understand. And also the Chelsea Groton Bank. I don't know if Bruce Flax may know more about this, because I think there's a relationship there with the chamber, but they also went to parking at certain times for a QR-based code parking, but maybe Bruce has more on that.
I don't have anything specific to report other than they had reached out to us and the Mystic Downtown merchants to say that should that be profitable, they would give the money to the merchants in the chamber to do, to do events down, to contribute to us for downtown. But I don't know how they're doing. Although I think in the first couple of weekends they did better than I thought they were going to do, is what I was told.
Yeah.
John, I'm sorry for interrupting. Could you just explain to everyone here how the QR parking works? Or others? If I pull into the Chelsea Groton Bank, what do I do if I'm going to get charged for parking?
Yeah, I think there's a signed QR code on the sign, similar to the restaurant when you go in and order, and you just bring that up. That'll send you directly to a secure site where you can enter your payment information right there. I think, I don't know if anyone else knows that, but I thought it was $5, a $5 flat rate. I could be wrong about that. But I believe
They're
it says
charging
right on.
$5 for half an hour at Chelsea Groton.
Oh, a half hour, $5 for the half an hour. Wow. Okay. That's significant. So yeah. And that's, that QR code parking is starting to really ramp through a lot of off-street lots. You don't see it on street per se, but you see it certainly in the lots is becoming a big issue, and I mean a big strategy. But part of that too is you've got to protect that QR code. There have been some theft of QR codes, and so I'm sure Laz Parking is checking on that daily and making sure that it's the correct code and so forth. But yeah.
And is Laz enforcing? I mean, what's the enforcement method?
The Laz will get that license plate, the license plate data right on their phone. It would show that they had paid. And I'm sorry, yeah, they would enter the license plate, so they would have that directly in real time on their cell phone for enforcement. Now, how they're enforcing that, I'm not 100% sure at the bank. I haven't talked with them about it, but I'm sure they are.
Okay, and then I'll hand it off to Shannon to talk a little bit about what's happening at the Mystic Seaport.
Sure, thanks. We started doing the shuttle and paid parking on Memorial Day weekend, and the plan was to go to 7 days a week at that time. We're charging $10 a day with the QR code. The only way that we're enforcing the QR code is it's the access to the shuttle bus. So that's how you get on the shuttle bus, is proving that you paid to park. We kept it 7 days a week for about a week, but the midweek usage was incredibly light. So we dropped it down to weekends only. We did weekends only until July 1st, when we went back to 7 days a week. And I think probably after Labor Day, we'll go back down to weekends only with the shuttle bus. Laz is running the shuttle bus, and we've got thanks to the town of Stonington, they gave us a parking spot kind of across from the engine room near Lee's Bakery for the shuttle bus. So that's where we're doing the pickup in town. It's been pretty busy in our lot. I don't have any firm data for you. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to connect with Laz this week. to give you real numbers, but we really have had very few issues. You guys were asking a little bit about how the QR code works. I find it very cumbersome, frankly. Like there's like 8 pages you have to fill out with your address and your email, and like who cares really, right? So I'm trying to work with Laz to reduce the amount of content that you have to put into the app to pay for your parking spot. Otherwise, I see that the attendance is significantly more in the later afternoon than it is in the morning, not surprisingly. But we run the shuttle bus from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. And I'd say like 3 and 4 o'clock is when it really starts to get busy in our lots. We put some brochures on the shuttle bus that have the link to the Mystic Chamber of Commerce app, so people can get information while they're on the shuttle about what to do downtown once they get there. We've had very few problems. As for enforcement, it's just access to the shuttle bus. I'm not walking around and checking whether people paid in the parking lot, because we still allow our museum visitors to park for no charge. Happy to answer any questions, but that's my quick little overview.
Shannon, it's Bob O'Shaughnessy here, Shannon. I have a question for you. It's my understanding that laws need to have a certain percentage for them to be cost effective. Do you have any idea what those numbers are per day? Because I know they didn't meet that in May when I talked to Stavros. I'm just wondering how that is as far as numbers are going. Do you have any idea of that?
Yeah, unfortunately, Bob, I wasn't able to connect with Sathi this week. He had a family thing going on, so I wasn't able to get firm data numbers. That is why we went down to weekends only. It's not that many spots that he needs to sell in order to break even on the shuttle bus each day. But that's definitely an expense that they're incurring as we pilot this program.
Thank you.
So yeah, I think it's great, Shannon, that you guys are working with Stonington and giving that a go. You're going to learn a lot and get a lot of data, I'm sure, from Laz. Certainly, as we see these shuttles grow, typically you've got a $10 park there where the shuttle's free. That's good. The shuttle's free, and but as you bring on more, if you can keep that fast, free, and fun to the downtown, and you can extend it out. They don't typically run at a profit. They do typically run subsidized. And again, that's why the comments at the beginning, there are state funding available if that's a continuing route and it serves.
Yeah, that would be great. I know he reached out to a lot of the hotels to try to get them to help fund it, to go from the hotels to here to downtown, but they weren't ready to buy in at that point. But, I think we would really much like to look at the state funding.
Yeah, and even that 30% match that in Connecticut you have to come up with, that's still, that can still be significant, and certainly advertising, the hotels, and then any contributions sometimes from parking can help as well. So
Right.
Great, thank you. I appreciate that.
All right. I saw Bruce Jones had his hand up.
Yeah, it was just a general question. Is the $10 is a flat fee, whether it's one person or a whole family of. A whole family. It's really the $10 for the car, not the $10 for the shuttle.
That's correct.
Okay.
Anyone else have anything to chime in on other existing parking initiatives since completion of the study? Going once? No? Okay. So potential expansion of off-street public parking, the shared lot agreements with the churches. John Burke, I know you had reached out to a few of the churches and some others.
Yeah, and we met with each of the pastors, you recall, a year ago, and have had conversations since. We actually, Paul Sauter and I had met with St. Pat's, the pastor, and I know I met with town staff in Groton with the other 2 churches on site. And, if you're the Union Street Baptist Church, they're certainly reporting out now that they're having more and more difficulty controlling the use of that lot. And making sure that it's open and available for Sundays services. I do believe they closed the entrance on High Street, given some of the demand that they've been having there. And they sort of reflected that, yes, they're very interested in participating with the town and on, permit program. I think, whether that type of compensation would be, paving. I know they do have a paving project coming up. If there would be some shared participation for the spaces that are used, that would be great. They see that potentially as a better way to control the parking, because the employees will all have a permit and be registered with a license plate, and are unlikely to not follow the regulations, so they don't lose their permit. So they're very interested still, and I think that's something we want to pursue with an actual agreement before them and negotiate it with the town. The other, St. Mark's, also very, very interested in participating. They had some maintenance requirements there that they would love to have filled if in return for the most convenient spaces in the lot, which are really the ones on the perimeter. And so that too could be an employee lot. I think with the pasture, we want to do the same. St. Pat's is a little more difficult because of the Saturday and Sunday services are very popular, and that lot gets used. I think we did talk about potentially weekday. There's a daily mass too, but maybe use during the weekday masses, maybe Paul, maybe less attended daily mass, and therefore there might be an opportunity during the weekday to do some of the perimeter parking, maybe the parking furthest away from the church that might otherwise go unused anyway. So we hadn't ironed out details, but we kind of discussed that.
Again, you want me to comment on that a little, John?
Sure, Paul.
Yeah, we had discussed that. Yeah, we have daily mass every day at noon. It's Fridays and Saturday nights. Could be weddings, Saturday baptisms, other events, Sunday mass, always full, 2 masses, Saturday night mass. Also, just so everyone knows, in the short term, we're in the midst of a plan to renovate, raise and then renovate our Catholic Center.
Mm-hmm.
And depending on market situation right now, our target is to start construction early. Ideally, it was the fall this year, but we may be pushing it off to the spring due to market conditions as to when we want to put the package out to bid. So that's pretty much going to take our lot out of any consideration, at least for a year, because you're looking at a year of construction. That's going to be a primary laydown zone, and we're going to have to probably get really restrictive. We could bleed in from areas, whether it be people at the post office have talked to us. We let them park there. We have some agreements with a couple of local businesses on Main Street that use our lot, and we get some bleed in. But so far, we've been fine. And if we need to enforce, we just bring some parishioners over there and lock it down if we have to. But I don't see any reasonable chance of agreements for at least another year. So I don't want anybody, and it's not because we don't want to. It's just because it's just not going to happen based on our construction plans.
Yeah, and we also had talked about the 4th voting hall parking lot. I kind of had lost track on. I thought that was going to construction. Susan, I'm not sure if that was delayed or what the current status is.
Sure, John. So the part of the 4th Street voting hall that actually got a little complicated was at the very beginning, we had to negotiate an easement with a private neighbor over being able to do some construction on their property to link in the tidal lock that needed to be put in the underpinnings of that parking lot. So really infrastructure wise, that had to be the first step. Because of COVID, it was very hard for us to actually get the parts. We finally did get them. They got installed. So, things are moving forward, but they never go quite as quickly as you like. I know we're really excited because, there's just to see it finally coming together. Whereas this has really been a concept plan that the town has had for multiple years. The original concept was actually done by some engineering students that we had UConn put together a concept plan, and that's been multiple years ago. So to see this actually coming, through to fruition in such an important spot in terms of where it's located and being one of the few real town assets that we control, that we can do something about, has been, it's like a little bright spot of hope.
Mhm.
Hey, Bruce, I see you have your hand up again.
Yes, I just have a question. Maybe it's for John Burke. What is the percentage of, and maybe it's by cars instead of people, of employee cars compared to visitor cars? Do you have a sense of how many employee cars that are? And then the second follow-up that is part-time and full-time, or all day long employees and then, part-time employees.
Yeah, I don't know about full-time, part-time. I know we did do license plate surveys in the 2-hour zone, and my recollection was in the peak hours, we had 1 in 4 of those folks staying longer than 2 hours. And we had 1 in about 7 staying longer than 4 hours. The 1 in 7 typically ends up being, a high percentage end up being employees. So, but we can't say definitively that's the case, but that's still, I have to go back to the report to validate those numbers, but that's my recollection. And those are high numbers. Those are high numbers for non-compliance compared to your peer cities or peer towns up the coast here.
Does that give you, is there a sort of a rough number of how many that, just sort of looking at how many employees we have and how many sort of maybe off-use, off-site lots and church lots that we have, that is there a match up?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, the major focus for us is to those 150 2-hour zones, sort of being 2-hour zone spaces are sort of the lifeblood of the businesses along with the art museum. So those, we really focus on those 150. So if you're assuming 15% of those minimum and maybe, 20% of those could be employees, then that kind of, even 25%, that kind of gives you sort of a rough number of folks we'd want to maybe give an opportunity to park somewhere, maybe not for free, maybe it would be a nominal fee for a permit to be a block or 2 away. That's sort of the focus of the sizing, if you will. But and then, certainly with these off-street lots, we're not, if there's ability, especially with the peripherals, we're not just focused on employees. We'd love to, as I say, a lot of your peer towns and cities up the coast are doing parking guidance systems where they basically, if we're full downtown, I don't want to send you down to the art museum lot when it's full. Why not have a variable message board up that sends them to a peripheral lot, visitors, not employees, so they don't add to that traffic and, and frustration of going where there's no parking. So
good. Okay, great. Thank you.
And, and that's where, as we start thinking about all these different implementation strategies, one of the things that's really difficult is if we don't have paid parking downtown, there's always that incentive for people to keep driving around in circles looking for free parking as opposed to parking in one of the paid lots. So, that's one of the, and it then adds to more traffic, more congestion. So something that we just see happening in that area. I see LJ has his hand up.
Yeah, John, you kind of made the same point I was looking at. If we've got to disincentivize these folks that are working downtown, that are parking in some of the prime spots. A couple of weeks ago, I spoke with a lady who lives on Gravel Street, and that was her major complaint. She goes, there should be some permanent parking for residents, and get some of the folks that are parking out in front of her residence all the time, that work in downtown Mystic, that take up some of the prime spots, that we got to somehow get them out of there by doing some no parking or metered parking, something that will keep them out of there. So I think I totally appreciate what John Burke had said earlier, that you've got to do all of these, that some of them don't work. I don't see how it would help anybody if we said, okay, you're working, you're moving to one of these lots, you got to pay to park in this lot if you're working in downtown Mystic. But oh, by the way, we're not doing anything about the side streets. There's no metered parking. So why would they do that? They would just continue to park where they're at right now.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point. And just following up on that comment, there have been communities that, have gone ahead and say, look, you know what, this is difficult with the paid part. We're just gonna proceed with shared lot agreements, and okay, maybe we'll have to use money from the general fund to pay for some, but we're just gonna keep expanding parking, and as much as we can, we'll just keep getting more surface lots or agreements, and then we're gonna enforce the heck out of the 2-hour zones. We're gonna have many more enforcement people patrolling. All that ends up happening is you end up filling those other lots, or you get use. You write a whole lot of parking tickets, and people are more disgruntled. So those communities typically come back for paid parking, but they give it a shot, because it really is the glue that makes everything work. From
the enforcement standpoint, and I think I'm probably jumping the gun a little bit because I think we're getting into the meaty parking area, but from the start, I felt like that's got to be part of the solution. And as we're sitting here thinking about this and talking about it, the calls I get, it's the phrase "help me, help you" comes into my mind. I think that metered parking would help us because it would self-enforce. We have dealt with some challenges as far as staffing. I haven't been able to dedicate as much of our personnel to going downtown Mystic, writing tickets all the time. But I think that will be a problem that helps to correct this. Or that would be a solution that helps correct this problem. Are able to get into that metered parking where we're not reliant on police officers or CSOs walking up and down the streets issuing tickets all the time. I think it self-regulates because people are getting out of there most of the time in order to avoid the ticket and are putting the metered coins in the meters or using the app. I think it's just, I really can't emphasize it enough from our standpoint, from the enforcement part of it, that's got to be part of the solution.
And I think we've kind of moved on to the next part of our agenda there, talking about proposed on-street metered parking. But before we do that, Paul did have his hand up. I want to just let him talk, make sure you're on mute.
Yeah, the chief talked about enforcement. I just see that as the big time key. We talked about that. It's like any rule or regulation. Let's enforce what we have first before we add new ones. But again, Chief Fusaro talked about pushing people who are parking. You had too, John Burke, about pushing people out into neighborhoods where I am, and be far beyond where I am. I'm within 5-minute walk. But you may have to consider resident parking permits after a certain time. And I know there's been some pushback on that. But if we're going to push employees out into neighborhoods, which is fine, there should be, I know Newport does a wonderful job of doing that. And it doesn't have to be like Boston, where it's a resident, the resident has to live within that block, or it could be Stonington resident. And on the other side could be Groton resident, or somehow we signify Mystic resident. I don't have all the details of it. Again, for me, in a personal standpoint, I have plenty of parking in my yard. It's never a personal issue with me. It's with my neighbors that are restricted, as we talked about. There's some 2 families and 3 families out there that are right in town. Or as you push out beyond, there's going to be those types of issues. So it being an all, many faceted plan, I think you may have to find that might be part of something that you may have to consider as we go down the line.
Yeah, and it's certainly a tool in the tool belt. It's certainly used in communities in New England. The way we look at it is, you put forward, you provide areas where those employees not only find it reasonable to park, but really choose to park. And I did focus there on the 2-hour zone, but as you point out, Paul, some of them are on residential streets that are very close to the 2-hour zone. So yeah, if they find
Chief talked about on Gravel Street.
Yeah, right. I think if we provide them these opportunities, maybe it is at St. Mark's, and it's something that they say, hey, every day I just go there. I don't have to worry about whether it's open or not. I just go right there, and it's a nominal fee. I'm going to do it. I have my guaranteed space. I'm going. then they'll do it, and they'll come off not just the 2-hour zone, they'll come out of the residential streets as well. But no, back to the residential permit. That's why I say we have to continually monitor, because regulations sometimes, not wholesale, but sometimes will be needed in certain areas where that on-street residential is needed by the residential. Nobody likes to see resident permit go in place and then there's nobody parked on that street. That's not a great result. But yeah, so I think that's something that is obviously in the toolbox. Yeah.
Going back to the seaport, one more point, then I won't belabor this any further. And I've thought, and when we've concluded that employee parking is a big issue. Have we looked at, is there room in the seaport lot for employee parking that can use that shuttle? Does that make sense? Maybe the timing doesn't make sense. Maybe you guys have already considered that.
Yeah, Paul, we thought a lot about the employee parking, and we would be more than happy to be a venue for that. I don't know that the shuttle is the best thing just based on people's work hours, but it's a short walk to town, really. And we would be very happy to have this conversation if somebody wants to get all of the business owners that have employees that need parking into a room together to coordinate. That's kind of my struggle, is trying to figure out, is it the downtown merchants? Like, who is it that would be the entity that would get all of these employees in one place to organize kind of a collective effort?
Well, if we enforce the parking regulations downtown, those employees might quickly jump right on board. Yeah.
Right, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Paul, when you talk about enforcing the parking regulations, are you talking about checking to make sure that cars aren't parking for more than 2 hours? Or are you talking about installing having to pay for parking downtown?
I think the start, I mean, I suspect that parking, getting parking meters is going to take a little time, but no, I'm talking about just the 2 or 3 hour parking. From what I understand, I mean, John Burke just said 1 in 4 to 1 in 7 don't abide by them. Can't CSOs do that? Can't they ticket? Can't we? It would be interesting to see if we enforce that, and then where it would go. Again, we have tools, as keep saying, in the toolbox now. Why don't we use those tools as we develop the others? And again, it will move, then possibly employers downtown will get complaints from their employees that they keep getting ticketed, and stuff will naturally funnel to where they should be. But until now, I'm not a police officer. I'm not in the police commission. I'm not any of those things. I don't deal with personnel. I don't have those answers. All I'm saying is if people start getting tickets for parking where they're not supposed to be, all of a sudden you hear yelling and screaming from whoever needs to, and solutions will find themselves, because we have the solutions here. But as Shannon just said, nobody's motivated to do it.
Well, I'm sorry, it would just seem to me that the parking meters, and we're not talking actual physical meters, I don't think. But I think, in my opinion, parking meters are something that we should have done 10 years ago. I mean, I think John Burke and I have talked about it. We're the only town of its size with the level of tourists coming to town that doesn't charge for parking on the street. And
people pay $5 for a scoop of ice cream and $5 for a donut. They'll pay $5 or $10 for parking.
I agree with you. And I'm not sure, the only question that arises in my mind, it would affect you, Paul, more than some others, all the people who live close to downtown, I don't know how far I know that in the current plan, the paid parking, proposed parking meter area doesn't actually extend that far into the neighborhoods. But if the end result is that by implementing parking meters in most of the downtown, it does drive a lot of those cars into the peripheral neighborhoods, which is, in say your case where you live, not that peripheral. I mean,
Jackson Avenue and Washington Street are full. Every parking space is full. Thursday through Sunday afternoon, it eases off. But I see those parking spaces turn over right in front of my house 3 times a day. So, I mean, they do turn over. So we don't really have an issue. So again, let's try enforcing and see what happens. Our parking spaces are full anyway. They're full right now. They've been full for 2 years.
I think the only caveat on that is just the enforcement effort for chalking, even with a virtual chalk, using handheld devices. would mean 2 and 3 times the amount of enforcement officers to be able to effectively get those. It's very, very time consuming is what I guess I'm getting at. Not to say it's not an option. It certainly is an option. The meter is to a large degree self-enforcing, and that's where they end up going to it. But I'm not, again, it's a reasonable consideration. Yeah.
Whatever you guys, whatever can happen the quickest and most effective, it doesn't matter to me.
Yep.
If we've got technology that can put meters in place quickly, and it's cost effective, man, that's a home run.
That's one other question, and I'll shut up. But has anyone done a study? Does anyone know what kind of revenue would potentially be generated by this in terms of defraying the cost of implementing the system or paying for the system?
Well, it's a good segue to the last item, or the second to last item on metered parking, because I think what ended up happening at the Groton Town Council is I think there was a real interest in having us look at projections of cost and revenue. And so we have started preliminary pro forma for the metered parking, just so that someone could make a logical decision based on more than on the finances. So really, what we kind of got down to on that was that looking at the going rate in communities from north of Mystic all the way up to Bar Harbor, Maine, is $2 an hour. That's the going rate on the, in Boston's higher. You've got some exceptions, but typically, and I think I listed some of those communities in the report. But I looked specifically at Bar Harbor and Plymouth, 2 of my clients, Plymouth, Mass, and Bar Harbor, Maine, who have very similar demand, especially in the heart of the downtown, and what I consider like a market square area, and utilizing some of their information and projections for utilization of those spaces. If we assume that we're a 7-day-a-week system between April and December, we got quotes for actual meter equipment for those 150 plus or minus spaces on either sides of the bridge. And it's fair to say that we would assume that all of that equipment capital cost would be paid off within the first season of implementation. And so, we need to understand better what the operating characteristics are. In other words, you could operate this on either, with someone operating separately in the meters and the enforcement in Groton, separate to Stonington. You could also hire someone like a Laz, put that out to RFP and have them maintain the meters, do the enforcement. A lot of most communities are moving in that direction. You have them already in town. So that's a reasonable consideration. So we'd have to know a little bit more about operation costs, but suffice it to say, you'd pay that off very, very quickly. And we'll have numbers for you on projected annual revenue. It would be well north of $500,000 a year in parking revenue between the metered parking and the citations, expired meter citations. So we'll be coming back with the granular on that. But I did want to say that's been being looked at, and the fear was that it would take several years to take care of that equipment cost, and that's not going to be the case.
Yeah, Scott, this is Bob O'Shaughnessy. I'd just like to comment on the CSOs that Paul mentioned. The problem, of course, is hiring enough personnel. Usually these individuals are in the law enforcement program at a college level. We wanted to obtain 5. We wound up with 3, and I'm sure the chief Chief Fazzaro's got the same issues. And then once school starts again, you lose all these people, and our shoulder seasons have kept increasing and increasing. So that's an issue. And the CSOs do issue parking tickets for violations, and they try the best they can. But like I say, getting the right personnel and having them there is an issue with both sides of the river.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. We have, we'd like to have 4, maybe 5 CSOs. We had 2, now we're down to 1, and we're trying to hire more, but it's increasingly challenging, not just to hire them, but police officers. So, you know, I'm with you. The enforcement part is extremely important. We need to do that, and we make every attempt to do that, but other priorities have to be considered. So when an officer is tied up for a call for service or an emergency call, then they're not out there writing tickets. So again, it brings me right back to that other point. I hate to hit it again, but the meters are, I think, a critical part of this. And I would agree rather than later is a good starting point for this whole thing.
Yeah, Chief, I would just echo that all of my clients are having having a very hard time finding enforcement officers. It's virtually the only more difficult position, it seems like, is bus driver right now to find people. So yeah, another reason to automate that system with meters.
John Godin also had his hand up.
Yeah, John, I had a question for you. You had said it would be about a 1-year payback for the capital investment into the meters. If we outsource to an LAZ who would do the enforcement for us, what do you think the net would be payback if we use that model? Are we talking 3-4 years?
No, I still think it would be in the first year you would net out the ability to reinvest in your downtown with, yeah. You have a tremendous demand issue in kind of unparalleled there with and we're talking about 150 metered spaces. We're not talking about, so this is the prime area, but no, even with the operating cost, you'll net out, I project you'd net out positive in the first year. And then again, once that capital's paid off, yeah, then you can have in year 2 real investment in your downtown.
And then the follow-on question to that, and this is nothing against the police forces on both sides, do you think someone like a Laz is better equipped to do the enforcement than the actual police forces on both sides of the bridge?
I wouldn't say better equipped. They may have the ability to get staff, maybe easier for them to get staffing.
Okay.
And it may or may not, but I think there are trade-offs associated with that. And certainly if you're going to go to a private operator, which many communities are doing, you just need to, the specifications for what they can and can't do have to be all the more tighter in that regard, in the management contract. But no, it's very common, and yep, it works
Okay,
either.
thank you.
Yep.
Let's see, Paul, you had your hand up, and then Paige.
I'll step back. My question was just answered.
Okay, thanks.
I had a question for John Burke. Can you hear me?
Yes, Paige. Yeah.
Have you seen any communities like ours in New England that uses a private operator for enforcement on the street? I understand how it would work on private property, but on street enforcement.
Yes. And it is done. I could probably get you a list, Paige, of the communities that have used it on street. Again, I think that the number one thing is if the management contract is written correctly, there's no incentive. I've seen some bad contracts where there's actually an incentive in the contract to write more tickets. And that's just about the worst thing that you can have. Most of those have been corrected over time. The first few that came out were that way. So you just need to make sure that management contract is, because they'll do what you want to do. But yeah, I mean, I have the city of Haverhill is one of my clients, and Laz Parking operates the garage, operates the streets in terms of the pavement kiosks, maintaining them, brings the cash to the bank, reconciles the credit cards, and enforces parking there. So that's an example.
Thank you.
Yeah.
John, was there anything else? So let's see. Did we talk about the recommended meter zone? Hours, rates, hours of operation? I think we started touching on some of that.
Yeah, I mean, just to give it flesh it out a little bit more. I mean, the meter zone, it's in the study report, but essentially we're looking at everything that's 2 hour now. We had talked about a little bit of the side streets on Gravel and Pearl, heading down there when they're very close proximity to the retail, right? So, and then, of course, you get all the way out. I'm trying to remember the side street that connects Gravel to Pearl, and it's escaping me, right? Cliff Street. You get all the way out to Cliff Street. That's still a 5-minute walk to Main Street, and that's quite a length of parking. So there's still plenty of parking as you get out on Pearl and Gravel. That's still within a 5-minute short walk of the downtown. But we're not talking about going all the way out there, but close to the retail, we'd like to see that. And then, of course, in Stonington, it would be the homes and Cottrell and East Main, and that would be pretty. There's not much parking on East Main. There's a handful of spaces, so really not a lot of metered parking over there. I think it broke down to something like 80-60. 80 spaces in Groton and 60 in Stony, something like that. As far as hours and rates, I mentioned the $2 an hour. Hours of operation, there it seemed 9 to 6. Most are doing 7 days a week. Typically, some communities say, well, we've got churches downtown. Let's start on Sundays at 12. So typically what you see is all day Sunday or 12 to 6, on a Sunday. The assumptions that I'm carrying again would be paid parking from April 1st to the end of December. And this can be modified by the recommendation of the task force to both town councils, but that's what's done, for instance, in Plymouth, Mass. There's a scaling back in many communities. Newport, Rhode Island scales back in those dead months of January, February, the scaling back. Sometimes, as I said before, they'll just carry the 2 hour, they'll bag the meters and just carry the 2 hour requirement during the off season. But for the performer, I was using, April 1st to December 31st.
And you only charge till 6 o'clock at night in the summer?
I mean, our counts kind of showed an easing after that. A case can be made that you go later, you get into the dinner hour and so forth. That can be something that can be added with time too. And communities typically will start at that 9 to 6 and then consider going to 7. See how it goes, if you will. But I think the most common time is probably 9 a.m. to like 7 p.m. It's probably the most common time you see out there. I just saw a little easing in your numbers after 6 that might allow you to stop at 6.
That's surprising in the summer. I would think I'd go till 9 o'clock at night. But what do I know? So.
Well, I mean, it's certainly something that when we can get in with the committee as we go forward on those regs and talk about that. There are trade-offs with that as well. Certainly a nighttime in the summer, and you can split it. You can go later in the summer and then edge back as it gets darker.
This is Paul Sarter. We're such restaurant driven now that yes, once 5 o'clock hits is when my neighborhood's full. Believe it or not, Saturday, Sunday during the day, yes, but it doesn't end until Sunday afternoon. That's when it slows down, Sunday afternoon.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with both of them. We do see from the activities at the restaurants and bars, you do have a strong showing of people late into the hours, even past midnight. I don't know that we need to go that late, but we're getting our calls for service downtown.
Yeah, well, that's good information. We certainly can extend those hours, at least seasonally. Sometimes you have an issue after dark, both with payments and with enforcement, but that wouldn't be till the late fall and as an issue anyway. So yeah, we can tweak those for sure.
Any other thoughts or comments at this point in time? Oh, Bruce has his hand up. And you're muted.
Thank you, John. Just a question, if we decided to move forward with a meter project, how long does it take to implement?
Well, I'm implementing in Camden, Maine right now. We're starting with the waterfront. And I think we need at least 90 days. You know, you don't have the procurement issue, particularly because you're a member of the National Cooperative Procurement Alliance, which means you can, those meter equipment and enforcement equipment has already been procured at a national level. So vetted and procured. And so all of the parking vendors that I work with are, you know, some of them are shortlisted there. So we can go right off of that list. So that procurement doesn't hold you up. Particularly, the issue would be the backlog on ordering and setting up your zones for metered parking, for permit parking and so forth. So that usually I'd say a minimum is 90 days. 120 is preferable if we have 120 days to, once a decision is, we're going forward. Yeah.
So then the other pieces of that puzzle are getting the support and approval from the respective towns of wanting to move in this direction and allocating the money to do that through a budgetary process.
Right.
So those, and passing any, you know, parking ordinances that go along with that metered parking.
Yes, in Camden, we were able to pass the ordinances at the front end of that 90-day period. But you're absolutely right. There's a lot of things to consider in terms of who's parking, and you know, some of those regulations need to be massaged a little bit. But you guys have a pretty good ordinance. I've gone through it. I think it would be relatively quick to make those modifications. But yeah, I think, John, given what you're saying, it might be as much as 4 to 6 months, you know, to get that put in place. And you know, typically you'd like to start during the peak season, you know, right after, you know, maybe just before. Typically late Memorial Day is very popular right before to start. I think the only thing we didn't talk about, John, was technology. And I know there's been some interest about just having QR code or mobile payment apps only on the street. And that, I just wanted to just speak to that a little bit. We really don't have any customers really doing that in New England right now. Because there's still, even though a very small percentage of us don't have a smartphone, very small percentage don't have a credit card, the ability to pay with coin is still, and credit is still, at least credit, physically is still the norm on streets. And so I think it's a transition technology. I think we are moving payments into the car. We're very close, you know, you're starting to see the QR and everything go into lots. That's certainly an easy place to do that. But on street, we have not seen that. So I think the recommendation would be, you know, for equipment on the street with mobile payment apps. And I'm happy to answer questions about that because I know that came up.
But that equipment, John, would not necessarily be meters. I mean, it could just be the little kiosk that you get your ticket from and stick it on the dashboard, that kind of thing.
I mean, certainly for streets like Main Street and Cottrell and even Water Street, even though the sidewalks are narrow, I mean, I think you could have pay stations on all of that where they're separated, and you can really place them sometimes like on Main Street on islands where visually they just look like they're part of the furniture, right? The difficult streets are the side streets like Holmes, Gravel and Pearl, because now you're dealing with very little right of way, and the sidewalks are at a minimum width. So that's where the conversation becomes more difficult on the single space first.
Mm-hmm. John, can you just explain a little bit of how, when you said that the QR codes or the technology works from inside the car, can you just explain a little bit how that works?
Well, I think the major manufacturers are working, your mobile payment app folks are like Park Mobile, Pay by Phone. Some of these major mobile parking payment apps are now working with, already have agreements with the major, especially the luxury car manufacturers, to start to put their payment systems into cars so that they can start to search for parking before they get to the destination, whether it's public or private, and either reserve it in advance or pay for it once they get there from the car. And so, I mean, just making the car your phone, right? So you already have everything loaded in with your license plate and your credit card, and you just park and you pay right from the car. And that goes right to the management app for your parking, and your enforcement people see it on their handheld in real time that they
So
made there.
basically, you're making it a smart car almost.
Yeah, and that's why I say it's moving fairly rapidly, but communities are still rolling out much bigger than Mystic pay stations and meters because of that gap between people who have the ability on their phone and credit card and the ones who don't. Some community, like in Massachusetts, I think there's still a law on the books. I thought Connecticut had it too, where retail had to provide a cash option. So equity becomes a major issue if you're designated mobile payments only, credit card only. And some communities are dabbling with the idea, okay, we'll do one side of the street just mobile payments, the other side with meters. But we really haven't seen even the bigger cities in New England move into, other than lots, to mobile pay only.
Cool. Thank you.
Sure.
All right. Anything else anybody wanted to bring up? All right, so our next steps from here, again, I can't stress the importance of needing all of you to continue to outreach and talk to the people, to your constituents, to your members, to your groups, and helping to get the word out on what we're working on, because I really think the next biggest hurdles for us to overcome are getting just more public support for understanding the project and the implementation steps that we're going to do. None of these steps are going to be easy steps. They're all going to come with a little bit of pain to everybody with them. But if we want to, truly manage the parking in downtown Mystic, we have to move forward with some of this stuff. We can't just let it kind of keep going the way it is. I do believe John Burke's going to do a little bit of additional analysis on things. I get a look, kind of was our next step. These meetings are open to the public. We're recording them. We'll post them for people to see, kind of just some of the ideas and concepts we're kicking around. But we do need to talk to our respective, town councils and select people in our, in both communities, and try to build some support with those groups, as well as, we can try to have some type of public meetings or outreach, continue to talk to the folks that we're looking at those shared parking agreements with. I think those are all things that we all need to work on a little bit.
Yeah, John, I would suggest that, we get with the churches before the next meeting, and we come back, even with a draft of what those agreements would look like. Certainly they have to go through legal counsel and all the rest. But I think we could do that. There are also other private surface lots that we want to meet with to get, whether it's weekday shared parking or weekend shared parking. So that's going to be expansion of parking, I think, is number one. And I'll also be bringing back the pro forma on the paid parking element, probably for the next meeting. I did want to mention one other, which is Mike Carroll at SEAT would be happy to attend an upcoming meeting to talk about what it might look like, and some of the ideas about an expanded, parking shuttle that, now I don't want to call it a parking shuttle, but a shuttle that might link other attractions and shuttle parking to the village. So,
Paul, I see your hand up and you're muted.
John Reiner. So it would help for me to put out, I've got like 20 to 30 neighbors on an email that I keep, I'll keep them in the loop when there's something worth or learning. So this would be, I want to send them a notice to possibly look at the survey, that would be helpful.
Yep.
All right, and that's just get on the Groton website. Is there a
It's,
tab there or?
It's Greater Groton.
Right.
There's a link to it from the town's website, but it's its own independent platform.
Okay, Greater Groton. All right, got it. Now, and you said this meeting is going to be online, is going to be
Yep.
available?
Yeah, that we recorded this meeting. We're recording it right now. So
So where would that be?
that will be on the town of Groton's webpage.
Okay, under what? Under this committee?
Probably just meetings. And we'll probably end up putting a link for this meeting. We have a landing page on our website. I think Susan Cullen probably has a landing page on the Stonington website, just at least, with the parking
Right.
report. So we'll get it out there in a few spots. I think we'll even post the recording of this meeting up on the Greater Groton site too.
All right, good. Okay.
Sure,
so I
John,
just
that's no problem. We can put it up on our site as well.
Okay,
Excellent.
great. Thanks.
Perfect. Thanks.
All right. Well, I think that's all we have. So, I really appreciate everybody's time today. And, we're shooting for an hour and a half, and look at that, 4 minutes to go. Sorry for the slight technical difficulties just starting things off, but I hope everybody has a great weekend and try to stay cool.
Thank you, John.
All right.
Yeah,
Thanks,
well,
John.
Take care,
well
everybody.
done. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.